Waxy flames shivered in glass jars that had been scattered like constellations across the scarred oak floor of the Velvet Raven Café. The whole place smelled of bergamot, melting paraffin, and nervous sweat, exactly the ecosystem you needed to host one of downtown Harborview's infamous underground poetry slams. I, Quinn Rialto, had hosted dozens of them, guiding trembling first-timers to the spotlight or coaxing veteran wordsmiths to drop brand-new lines. Tonight felt no different, until it became entirely different. We were halfway through the lineup when I noticed that Milo, our sound technician, hadn't popped his head through the curtain in a while. Ordinarily, he peered out every couple of poets to tweak a level or give me a thumbs up about the feed that reached listeners on the live stream. The Velvet Raven's back room was only a former storage closet repurposed into a tech booth, so I could usually see the glow of Milo's monitor from stage. Now it was conspicuously dark. Still, the show had to glide forward, so I announced the next performer in my best honey-coated cadence. Give some candlelit love to Aria Storm, y'all. Applause shuffled through the flickering chamber, and Aria, wearing a black velvet blazer over a silver sequin top, took the mic. Her poem tumbled out like broken crystal. Your mouth tasted of feedback and midnight static. Your fingertips, copper wires coiled around my pulse. The audience hummed with the delighted discomfort that raw confession can summon. But I felt something else, an electric chill, because Milo had once read me a line eerily similar while tuning the monitors last month. Aria finished to thunderous snaps and returned to her seat without glancing at me. I made a mental note. Between sets, I slipped behind the velvet curtain, intending to fetch Milo. Instead, I almost tripped on him. He was on the floor, eyes bulging, a microphone cable knotted twice around his neck like a malicious scarf. The other end was still plugged into a mixing board. His face had the pallor of candle wax left to harden in a freezer. I knelt, checked for a pulse, found none. At that instant, I realized the slam's hush outside was so complete that even my heartbeat sounded amplified. Shutting the door gently, I stood, breathing around the panic. Harborview's police station sat 8 blocks away, but if I called them now, we'd have a stampede of patrons, headlines tomorrow morning, months of cancelled shows. Whatever justice deserved to happen. Well, I had maybe 10 minutes before the last poet finished, before anyone noticed Milo's conspicuous absence. I'd solved tiny mysteries before. Who stole Jackson's moleskin? Which barista swapped the decaf and regular beans? This was murder, a canyon apart. But something about the knots in the cable and Aria's poem convinced me I already possessed pieces of the puzzle. I unlooped the cable carefully, preserving the shape of the knots, then drew the curtain closed so no one could see the body. I flicked on the booth's spare lamp, scoured the area. A mug of throat-coat tea sat half-finished beside the console. Milo's phone rested face down, unlocked, its camera app still open. Perhaps he'd been framing a candid shot of the audience. There was photography equipment scattered in an open backpack. Milo moonlighted as a set photographer. Nothing else looked ransacked. I slid his phone into my jacket, pulled the curtain aside, and returned to the footlights just as Sawyer, the night's only beat poet, wrapped up an ode to insomnia. The clap-snap applause faded. Brief intermission, I announced, voice steady only by rehearsal. Refill your chamomile, kiss somebody, whatever moves you. A wave of chatter rose as patrons dispersed. Perfect. There were 5 people who had both motive and opportunity during that first hour. 1, Aria Storm, glitter blazer poet with the suspicious verse. 2, Gus Hector, the cafe's owner, perpetually one foreclosure away from ruin. Milo had recently demanded a raise for upgraded gear. 3. Penelope Lowe Vasquez, a first-time performer who had arrived early to practice into the house mic. She could have cased the cables then. 4. Byron Slate, Slam regular and Milo's roommate, who fought with him last week over unpaid rent. 5. Jasmine Wren, a soft-spoken librarian rumoured to be dating Milo, or maybe no longer dating Milo, depending which back-alley gossip you trusted. Intermission clocks in at 7 minutes by my rule. I needed all of them. I drifted from table to table, engaging each suspect with a practiced host's grin while letting questions slip like paper airplanes. First stop, Jasmine, nursing a chai latte near the pillar of mismatched candles. Her eyes had that brackish sheen found only in people forcing themselves not to cry. Powerful readings tonight, I opened. She nodded. Aria was something. I let silence stretch until she volunteered more. I didn't realize she and Milo were even speaking again. Again, there it was. You heard from Milo this evening? I asked. Jasmine shook her head. He texted he'd swing by my place tomorrow to talk. That's it. She traced a circle on the mug's rim. No red marks on her fingers, no cable burn on wrists. I moved on. Across the room, Gus Hector wiped tables with frenetic polish. When he saw me, he grinned, revealing the gold canine tooth he flashed whenever bills were due, a telltale sign of nerves. Crowd's bigger than last month, I said. Needed it, he muttered. Vendor invoices stacking higher than espresso grounds. Milo mentioned cost of living adjustments, I probed. Gus harumphed. Wanted a 50% raise, said livestream followers spiked because of his mixing tricks. I told him the only trick I know is staying open. Any dust-ups tonight? Hardly spoke to him. Gus gestured toward the distant bar. He spent pre-show tucked in his booth, looked distracted. I glanced at his hands, calloused but steady. Could Gus have slipped behind the curtain during performances? Possible, yet he'd been pulling drafts for patrons all evening. The cafe's single row of sightline clear candles meant anyone exiting behind the stage would have been noticed, unless they timed it during applause or dimmed lights. I thanked him and slid next to Penelope Vasquez, who was scribbling revisions onto a page already flecked with white-out scars. Nerves? I asked. She laughed. I switched my closer again. Her voice quavered like plucked harpstrings. Mind if I borrow your mic technique later? You seemed comfy during sound check. Oh, Milo's a wizard, she said. Then her expression fell. Is he okay? I haven't seen him watching from the back like earlier. I hedged. He had to step out. Her shoulders loosened. If Penelope had been the killer, would she risk asking about him? Maybe, maybe not. Byron Slate leaned against the fireplace mantel, arms folded. He wore fingerless gloves despite the cafe being balmy. When I mentioned Milo, he spat a bitter laugh. Roomy's got a way of making himself scarce when rent's due. Still fighting? Told him today he had 48 hours, or I'd pawn his camera. Byron shook his head. But murder him? What are you implying, Quinn? Nothing. My slip had cracked open suspicion. Byron pushed off the mantel and stalked toward the restroom corridor. I watched his gait, confident, not hurried. That left Aria. She lingered at the edges of the circle of candles nearest the stage, accepting compliments with an ethereal half-smile. When I approached, she said, "You look ruffled, darling host." "Call it adrenaline," I replied. "Your piece tonight, it felt personal. Isn't that the point?" Some lines seemed aimed at Milo. Aria's eyes, smoky with coal, tilted upward. If the cardigan fits. She lifted her smartphone. The reflection of a text thread glowed. He begged me to demo a new track after the slam. Guess the universe rewrote the set list. I searched her wrists. A faint reddish stripe hugged her left one. Cable burn? Or mark from bracelets? I couldn't tell under candlelight. The bell chimed, signaling intermission's end. I jogged backstage, heart ricocheting. Milo's body waited like a rebuke. I told myself, collect facts, don't call cops yet. The truth might still flicker among the living. I cued the remaining performers, and while they dripped poems into the hush, re-examined the tech booth with my phone's flashlight. Something glinted near Milo's elbow, a guitar pick imprinted with a holographic moon. I'd see that pick before. Byron used them when performing spoken word with acoustic loops. Strange he didn't mention retrieving it. I snapped a photo, pocketed the pic in a plastic bag I found among Milo's camera gear, and then studied the knots in the cable again. 2 granny knots stacked, forming a crude square knot. Whoever did this knew chords but not sailor-grade bindings. A poet accustomed to wrapping gear loosely? Or a bar owner who rarely touched audio lines? Could be anyone. The evening crawled to its finale. Penelope performed last, voice trembling but clear. If truth were a filament, we'd all be fuses. She earned warm applause. I stepped on stage to close the night, breath tight. Before you head out, I began, I need a moment of your attention. My gaze tracked each candlelit face. Milo Kenzie, our sound technician, has experienced a serious medical emergency. For the time being, I ask all staff and performers to remain until we have more information. Gasps flew like moths. Byron cursed under his breath. Aria affected serene curiosity. Jasmine's hands flew to her mouth. Gus dimmed the house lights but left enough glow for safety. I guided everyone to a semicircle of mismatched couches, deploying my best benevolent dictator tone. While we wait for paramedics, a lie, I need to clarify a few facts about where each of you were during the first half of the show. The poets glanced among themselves. Nobody refused. Perhaps they still trusted the host they'd known for years. I started with Gus, who confirmed staying behind the bar the whole time. Customers corroborated. Penelope had sat front row aside from her bathroom dash, between performers 2 and 3. Sawyer remembered exchanging nods with her while she stood in line. Byron had floated among tables, though Jasmine noted he disappeared right after her piece. Aria's timeline wove differently. She admitted slipping backstage 10 minutes before her set to center her breathing. That overlapped with Milo's last known alive sighting. Byron immediately pounced. So you were alone with him? Aria didn't flinch. Yes, we argued about intellectual property. He was filming poets without consent. Interesting accusation, though Milo had always secured waivers. I needed leverage. I pulled Milo's phone from my jacket. If the camera app was open, maybe it had recorded more than ambience. I tapped the gallery. A new video thumbnail glowed, time-stamped 8:17 p.m., 15 minutes before I found the body. I hit play. The angle pointed from the console toward the small backstage corridor. Milo's voice murmured, "Just ambient crowd B-roll." Footsteps approached. Aria stepped into frame, sequins flashing. She said, "Delete the rehearsal footage." Milo replied, "We agreed I could keep it for mixing studies." Aria pressed closer. "You think I'm stupid? You had no right to film us after hours." Milo's hand rose defensively. Aria's face was fierce but not murderous. The video jerked. Apparently Milo set the phone down. Their words blurred into whispers. Then another figure entered. Byron, gloves visible. He touched Milo's shoulder. Rent. We talk now. Arya exited left, expression unreadable. Milo sighed. Dude, can it wait? The footage ended as the phone tipped, capturing a swirl of ceiling. Gasps erupted around me as the group watched. I'd mirrored the video on the cafe's overhead projector, bypassing the mixer the way Milo taught me months ago. The raw confrontation now hovered ghost-like above us. Byron's jaw clenched. Argument isn't murder. Where did you go after that? I asked. To smoke. Alone? Penelope hesitated. I passed him in the alley, she said quietly, when I was rehearsing lines out back. So Byron and Milo were outside minutes before Milo would return and get strangled. Yet the murder weapon was a mic cable, likely yanked from the booth, not easily accessible outdoors. Byron would have needed to lure Milo back in, re-enter unseen, kill him swiftly, then exit before my next introduction. Possible, but so could Arya's timeline still align. She had motive if she believed Milo held blackmail footage of their affair, and that redness on her wrist. I scrolled further in Milo's gallery. A still photo set from 2 nights prior showed Milo and Arya kissing among stacked stools after closing. Secret affair confirmed. Another directory contained grainy clips of them rehearsing private spoken-word duets. Nothing scandalous enough to ruin reputations, but maybe Arya feared exposure. The phone buzzed, an incoming text from an unsaved number. Delete everything or we're done. I flipped it for the room to see. Jasmine inhaled sharply. That's my number, she whispered. Eyes shifted. You threatened him? Penelope asked. Jasmine's voice quivered. Not threatened. I was hurt. We broke up last month. I found out tonight he'd filmed over our old couple videos with new ones of him and Arya. Tears shimmered. I told him to delete them. Did you confront him in person tonight? I said. She shook her head. Couldn't bear to. Which left motive but not opportunity. I moved the conversation back to evidence, the guitar pick. From my pocket, I produced it inside the bag. Found next to Milo. Byron examined it. Yeah, could be mine, could be any musician's. But you're the only musician here tonight. He made no denial. The group splintered into anxious whispers. I stepped aside and called 911 at last. A murder had occurred, and I had enough to guide detectives. Yet a nagging fragment refused to align. The knot. I retrieved the mic cable, still bearing its loops, and laid it on a table. Who here wraps cables this way? I asked. Gus scanned it first. Not how we teach staff. You loop, not knot. Byron shrugged. Penelope squinted. Looks like square knots my dad uses on boats. Boats. Penelope grew up in a marina town. Maybe she'd learned them young. But the knot actually was 2 clumsy granny knots, not a true square knot, a faker imitating boat lore. I faced Arya. You're from inland Kansas, right? Landlocked? She chuckled. Indeed. What about you, Jasmine? My parents owned a sailboat, she said slowly, eyes narrowing. But the knot's wrong, I continued, as if someone copied a sailor's knot from memory and fumbled it. Arya's face remained placid, but her eyes glittered. Jasmine's brow furrowed. Byron scowled, anxious. Penelope bit her pen cap. Then I saw it. Gus's gold tooth winked rhythmically with his quick breaths. He was sweating rivers, more than money worries warranted. And earlier he said he hardly spoke to Milo, but Arya's confrontation indicated Milo filmed poets without consent. Gus, as owner, could be liable for lawsuits. Milo demanding a raise, Milo potentially dragging him into legal trouble, double motive. Gus, I said gently. Show me how you wrap extension cords at closing. Come on, Quinn. Humour me. Reluctantly, he picked up the cable's loose end and began coiling it in loops around his elbow, but his fingers instinctively tied the exact granny knot at the end to secure it. Muscle memory, plain as sunrise. Arya gasped. Byron's gloves squeaked as he clenched fists. Gus dropped the cable as though bitten. He was going to bankrupt me, Gus blurted. Raise, liability, everything. Said he'd walk and pull all his followers, shame the Raven on socials. I begged him to delete the footage. He laughed. Gus's face crumpled. I just meant to scare him, to choke off his words for once. It happened too fast. Police sirens snaked toward the alley. I exhaled for the first time in an hour. Later, statements were given amid the swirl of blue lights and snuffed candles. Detectives bagged the cable and Milo's phone, thanked me for preserving the scene. Patrons filed into the night, voices subdued. Arya sat on the curb, eyes blank but unbroken. Jasmine hugged Penelope. Byron leaned into a lamppost, smoking in silence. I remained in the threshold of the Velvet Raven, watching Tex wheel Milo's shrouded gurney past the chalkboard that still advertised tonight only Torchlight Tongue's poetry slam. The chalk letters blurred through my tears. When the cafe emptied at last, Detective Ibarra approached. You pieced this together fast, Ms. Rialto. Hosting a slam's like conducting an orchestra, I said hoarsely. You learn everyone's rhythms. When one goes off beat, you notice. He nodded, then nodded again to the extinguished candles. Shame about your lighting. I smiled sadly. We'll spark them again. Words need places to burn. Hours later, with dawn brushing the horizon, I sat alone at table 3, scribbling the night's epilogue into my journal. Beneath grief pulsed relief. Truth wrestled free, however ugly, is still a poem. And tonight the Velvet Raven had spoken its final stanza.